Oh, wow.
Saw it twice, because I was like, oh my god.
That was just weird.
I always used to see a light coming up,
Yeah.
like a headlight, but there was nobody there.
Oh, it's just disappeared.
Hello everyone, welcome to Truth Proof. Hope you're all well today, and I can see already that we've got quite a few people in the chat, so thanks for the support, guys. And tonight we're talking with Mave Calvert, who's going to share with us something we've never really talked about before, which is dowsing and its connections to other types of phenomena, and it's really interesting. And we'll bring Mave on shortly. I first became acquainted or got to know Mave back in 2020 during lockdown, when I was invited to speak at one of the dowsing meetings, and they want, like, obviously an alternative subject to what they're involved in, or a little bit, but still in the same kind of genre. So yeah, it should be interesting. We want questions in capital letters if possible, please. And yeah, let's see what Mave's got to share with us, and hear a few accounts and strange and unusual things that she's experienced, and her and the team over the years. But before we get to that, because we've got like well over 100 people in here, we've got Steve Colling there, I can see, Zero Dawns, Tim Stoker. See, Pete's in tonight. Good to see you, Pete. You finally made it. Jill Olsen, Linny, Mrs. Linny, Mia Girl, Dragonborn, Zero Dawn. Let's have a look. Vladimir, I'm not going to go on with the rest of that. It's a long name, that one, isn't it? Jane Louise Bowery, Harding, formerly. NA Grandma, Blue Carrot TV, Stargazer, DM Moonsun, Andrew Wild. And we'll do a little bit more of that later. See, there's Mark there, which is easy to say that. Deb Shaw's in. Good to see you, Deb. And Rod. Oh, I like that thumbnail. I like that swan. So we'll bring Mave in, and here we go. Hello, Mave. Good to see you.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, well, lovely.
Thank you for inviting me on.
No, you're welcome. Thank you for agreeing to share a little bit of this. It's not an unusual topic for you, but it is for me, and maybe for some of our listeners. I know Dragonborn earlier said she's really looking. Al Durham's there. Good to see you, Al. Dragonborn said that she's looking forward to this, so she's got very similar interests. But for you, Mave, how did you become interested in dowsing and everything attached to that? Where did it start?
Well, about 25 years ago, I had a series of nervous breakdowns, and they seemed to rewire my brain. Because I used to work in the IT industry as a project manager, and it's like the breakdowns stopped the circuits in my left brain from working, so I couldn't do things like computer programming anymore. But slowly they opened up circuits in the right brain, and I suddenly started to take an interest in all things esoteric about 2006. And I just found out about dowsing, and I thought, yeah, that sounds interesting. So that's when I got into it.
So prior to 2006, you got no interest whatsoever in any of this, and due to unforeseen circumstances, there's a changing path of your life, and suddenly you're involved in dowsing. And
yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
I mean, there's a few coincidences here, because we used to live, and I've never met you, we used to live about a quarter of a mile apart.
Yeah.
That's odd, isn't it? You know, and you know, I found
just off Spraer Road in Doncaster. Because when I first picked up one of your Truth Proof books in lockdown, which is what made me try and get you on one of the Ridings Dowsers Zooms to talk to us, I realised you'd lived on Spraer Road. And when I lived with my parents, we lived on a road just off Spraer Road. And when we used to walk up to school, which I presume was the same school your daughters went to when you were there, we used to walk past a house not far from where I lived, and we always used to call it the spooky house.
Mm.
I don't think it was yours, but it was somewhere around there.
Yeah,
So,
it's strange you should say it, but yeah, it could have been that one. But there weren't a lot happened in that one, if I'm being truthful. It was more when we got up into Bridlington. But what about? Do you want to take us back to some of the early things and what you discovered happened in 1937 in? I think it was in one of your properties.
yeah. Well, it's actually the house I'm still in. We
Okay.
moved in here in 1996, and that was 10 years before I really came interested in all things esoteric. I just had a passing interest in ghosts, and I was more interested in tracing my family history and local history and that. And we found out it was when I tried to trace the history of the house, and people kept climbing up on me. And then we found out that the house that we lived in, it's an ex-mining village, and our house used to be what the headmasters lived in. And next door was the village school. And we found out that one of the headmasters had actually been killed in our house.
Right. Okay.
And, yeah, that was quite a shock. And when we went into the village pub and told people what we found out, so some of the old ladies said, "But don't worry, love, don't worry. He haunts the school, not your house." But of course, I did worry. Don't think I slept that night. But yeah, there wasn't a great deal of spooky stuff went off in the house itself. But everybody in the village, when they walked past the school, which was semi-derelict by then, they always thought it was spooky. And they used to say to me, "I don't know how you can live next door to that place."
Oh, so the house was next door to the school as well. Yeah, yeah, the old
Yeah,
schoolhouse.
yeah,
Yeah,
yep. The headmasters used to live in it.
yeah.
The school's been pulled down now, and there's a nice housing estate on there. But we used to be next to this spooky derelict building. And then I think it'd be about 2016. I was a member of the Ridings Dowsers that are based in Yorkshire, and they have meetings up at Boroughbridge. And we had a meeting up there, and the speaker was a chap called Adrian Incledon Webber, and he was from Richmond. And he was giving a workshop and showing people how to do spirit release to connect with earthbound spirits and help them pass over. And I tried to connect with his headmaster, and he was having none of it. I was just, he was swearing at me and all sorts. So I thought, I'm not up to this. So I emailed Adrian afterwards and said, "Can you give me some tips?" And he just said, "Leave it with me." And 2 or 3 weeks later, he finally managed to connect with this spirit of the headmaster and send him on to where he needed to be. But he said it was one of the most tricky spirit releases I have ever done. He says, and it turned out he was holding back 52 other souls.
Really.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
I mean, Adrian's sort of one of the foremost dowsers in this country. He used to be a vice president of the British Society of Dowsers, so he knows his stuff.
So you said then that this spirit was swearing at you.
Yeah.
How did you hear that? Clairaudience, or did you actually hear that audibly?
It was like in my own thought voice. It's like I knew what he was saying. I'm not clairaudient or clairvoyant, but I just knew what he was saying.
Okay.
And I think there are a few dowsers who, when you've been dowsing for a few years, I think you just start to develop that circuitry in your brain, and you get used to, you get the idea of what's being said or something.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah, a
Well,
bit like a medium would hear it, but I'm not a medium.
yeah, well, that's another thing that I was thinking as you were saying it, and you're looking at me as green as grass when it comes to dowsing. So there'll be people who know a lot more about it in chat than me. But so, what's the difference between when you're talking about this guy who released the spirits? What's the difference between a dowser and a spiritualist?
Well, Adrian, who did it, he's a master dowser, but I think the spiritualists and the mediums, they don't need to use the dowsing tools. They're sort of clairvoyant or clairaudient, so they're getting the information straight through into the brains, whereas the dowser would probably use these rods.
Okay.
You might, if you were starting off, you might say the first thing you do is try and get a yes and a no answer. So you might say, "Show me my answer for yes," and maybe the rods would cross, and answer for no, and the rods might come out. So a dowser would probably, if they find there's a spirit around, they might ask the spirit questions and get the spirit to move the rods. So you might say, are you the spirit of a headmaster? And it might say yes, or whatever. But yeah, as I say, once you've been doing it for quite a while, and you sort of seem to know in your head what they're trying to say to you.
So you develop like some kind of intuition almost, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you do. Yeah.
So sorry, Maeve.
Yeah.
So see, in my head, I'm thinking we're looking for water and we're dowsing for water and energy lines, but there's much more to it then, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. Yeah. I mean, the British Society of Dowsers was actually started by military people in 1933. Most of them were Royal Engineers, and they used it for looking for water, for oil, and for minerals and that. And so, even though it sounds a bit woo-woo these days, it was actually military people who started it. And so to start with, it was mainly looking for water, but now we've realised that we can just use it to contact any aspect of the unseen world and try and investigate it.
How much of that, Maeve, and how much of that do you think is just working through us, and it's actually the human and our thought process that is the tool, not the dowsing rods? And I'm not saying that you're wrong here. I'm just curious, and I always jump to the Ouija board, which we don't use, we don't claim to use, we don't want to use. But it seems to be a tool where people can contact the other side, usually with bad results or something that's not very nice coming back from the other side. But it's only a tool. So could we use? And I'm not downplaying it, but could we use a couple of pens? I'm just thinking that.
Yeah. You can use anything to dowse with it. There's a very, very good dowser in America called Raymond Grace, and he uses a pendulum, but it's not the normal dowsing pendulum. It's a bullet, and
Really?
it works for him. Yeah,
Yeah.
it works for him. But several of us in the dowsers, we also use deviceless dowsing, which we use our hands. Because actually, when I started trying to learn to dowse, I couldn't get the tools to work. Pick up a dowsing rod and it just round and bang me in the face, just like it has now. But I used to do Reiki, which is like a form of energy healing. And I used to go to these Reiki shares where one person would lie on a table and the two or three of us do Reiki on them. And I used to put my hands on somebody's body and my hands would float up. So I thought to myself, right, if my hands will move on their own, maybe I can use them as dowsing tools. So I actually said, show me my answer for yes. And I got one hand went into a fist. Show me my answer for no. And the other hand went into a fist. So where you're saying it's the human body, I think you're dead on there.
Yep.
And there are a lot of people who can do this deviceless dowsing, which is either like moving your hands as you would in Reiki, or actually just feeling somebody's aura with your hand, moving towards somebody and feeling your aura.
Well,
a lot of people don't realise the dowsers.
Yeah, well, I don't know what I'd call myself or people in chat. Probably people in chat want to call me all sorts, but what I'm meaning is we've spoke about this, me and you, Maeve, before, and my girls and Mary and some other members at family will know that I've not done dowsing, but I've actually put my hands near people, and you can almost feel a pressure. And I only became aware of it but not by knowing this ufologist, but I just saw him on a workshop talking about this called Peter Paget, and he was telling people to put their hands together. He says, and can you feel the pressure, and can you feel this pressure building? And I thought that's it, and it kind of played with idea. Are we imagining it? But it does feel like there's something there. It's fascinating. There's a question here, Maeve, and I don't know how relevant it is, but I just want to keep putting them up. Maeve, any views on the idomotor effect and the use of dowsing rods?
I don't know what that effect is, I'm afraid.
Well, no. So give us a bit more information, because I haven't got a clue, Rod. I just like his thumbnail. That's the only reason I did it. Well, no, we'll keep putting them up as they come, as the questions come up. But What are the uses then? Give us some more uses for dowsing, and then we'll go into a few of the cases that you've looked into and got knowledge of.
Well, I mean, a lot of the main use of it is for finding water. There are a lot of professional water diviners around, and also for finding water pipes and gas pipes on your property. Then you've got people who go and help archaeologists out. You can get your rods to move if you're walking across where there's a wall underground. You can get your rods to move there, and they can be helpful for telling archaeologists where it might be a good idea to dig a trench. Then there are people who do dowsing for health. They'll douse for things like that they might have. We use a lot of these dowsing charts. They're just little charts. You
Okay.
probably can't read it, but what dowsers will do, they'll hang a pendulum over these charts, and it might just have a scale of 1 to 10 on, and they want to ask, how healthy is somebody, and the pendulum will go round and end up on a particular number. Or they can have a list on this chart saying what might be what foods you're intolerant to, and you'll go around with the pendulum, and it'll actually say which foods that person's intolerant to. And that there's a crossover with a lot of the healing modalities like Reiki, reflexology, all sorts of alternative and complementary therapies. Same as there's a crossover with some dowsers are clairvoyant as well, clairaudient or mediums. And then, sorry.
No,
Yeah.
and some people, people, academics and people of science, was that there's absolutely no proof of this at all. Just like with the subject of UFOs or the subject of cryptids. Where I'm going with this, it gets used by professional bodies to detect things. And I didn't know about the chart, but the people use dowsing over maps, don't they?
Yes,
Locating things using a map.
and over Google Earth.
Over Google, I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
There are a lot of dowsers work remotely. I mean, Adrian Incledon Webber, who I mentioned up in Richmond, he does what you call home healing. And he does that remotely. He'll take a plan of your house if you send it to him, because you might have problems in your house that it might feel spooky. People might get a lot of illness. And he will take the plan of your house and he'll douse it remotely using his pendulum. And he'll write on that plan, maybe where there's an underground stream coming underneath, which might be detrimental. There might be an energy line going through it. He might find an area that appears black in one room, and he might call that an argument corner. And it could be where people have argued a lot, and it's left sort of a residue of that, and other people are picking up on it. And he will do that survey remotely and then send it to you and see if it sort of correlates with what you're experiencing. Then he can actually do healing to try and sort out a lot of the problems. Like he can remotely get rid of the area of darkness that's where the arguments were and that. He actually got into this because he was an estate agent, and he found that some houses were always selling and coming back on the market, and he called them divorce houses. And that's when he started looking into why certain houses have that problem. And he often finds something that we call geopathic stress, which is something coming up from the ground which is detrimental to the people who live in the house. It could be, it's often due to the underground water or the geology or something like that. But the other thing that we douse for as well is, and it's one of the things I douse for a lot, is what we call earth energies. And they're lines of energy, but the general public tend to lump them together under ley lines. But you've got like straight lines of energy, then you've got ones that meander around, and you've also got several systems of grids around the planet. And we tend to douse for those a lot. And there are also sort of vortexes of energy coming up from the ground that we look at. So there's a multitude of things we look at in dowsing, all sorts.
It's fascinating. And to jump back to the guy who, the former estate agent, a little joke coming to my head straight away, thinking now he's going to get some house price put down or something, get house put down in value, but only playing there. But how does he and I'm not, I don't even know why I'm asking it, because I don't think any of us have got the answer. But how could he alter anything that's being created by a underground water, a water course beneath the property?
I think you just get an energy connection with it, but
Okay.
by sort of thinking about it with intent, you just get this energy connection.
So once again, it's all here, isn't it? Everything, the power of the mind. You know, and once again, briefly jump into science and academia, where they say there's no proof in this. Einstein were a big believer in dowsing, weren't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's the only benchmark we need to use to beat science with when they say it's a load of rubbish. Just
Well, if you think about it, somebody could look now and think, here am I in Nottinghamshire, there's you in Yorkshire. How on earth can we be talking to each other all this way apart?
Well, I think probably if we'd have gone back 50 years, everybody would have just rolled their eyes and laughed at the idea, wouldn't they? We've got another question here. Let's have a look at this. Steve Collin. Evening, Mave. Am I right thinking there are 4 types of dowsing and you are a spirit dowser?
There's several different types of dowsing. Yeah, spirits are one thing. I mean, I think I'm probably an all-rounder. I have a go at everything. But some people specialise more than others. So some people do specialise in finding spirits, and they'll go into people's houses and find out what's happening, and try. A lot of what we do in home healing that is to try and calm the situation down, so that the people living in the house can be a bit more settled and happy. It's probably different to a paranormal investigation where you'd go into maybe a haunted location and try and provoke the phenomena to try and investigate it.
You want
We often get called into people's houses where they're really upset, so we need to calm it down to try and make their quality of life a little bit better.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, I've not been on any of those kind of investigations, and good luck to people that do it, but that seems to be the theme, isn't it? Where, you know, they want to see some activity. They want to, I don't know, stir the wasp's nest up a little bit so that they can, and you know, and I think we probably, I don't mean yourself, but there's probably a lot of people of a similar mindset. If you're interested in the subject, then you do want to see some evidence of what you're looking into. So it's just like when we go up onto those cliff tops, or we go into some forests or remote woodland, we are hoping that something's going to happen. I don't mean that we want something terrible to happen, but we're hoping that we provoke a reaction from something. So maybe you're sort of wanting to pacify it all, which is no bad thing, but it's kind of opposite scale of what spiritualists do. Poltergeist investigators and paranormal investigators are doing, isn't it? Do you clash?
We do investigate things when we're out on site, say in the open air, if you're at an old abbey or an old church or something. But you've obviously got to be careful when it's somebody's home and they've got to live there. Because, I mean, we could come into your house and stir things up so it gets unbearable. So you can't live there.
You're not going to be very popular if that happened. I get it. So let's have a look at this question.
I did get a paranormal group ask if they could do an investigation in my house when they found out that the headmaster had been killed there. But I said, look, I appreciate you want to investigate these things, but you know, I've got to live in it, and I was worried that it might stir something up and make it uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, they wanted to do one in the school next door, which would have been great, but unfortunately, the school was semi-derelict at the time, and they couldn't get permission because they didn't think it was safe enough.
Right.
Well, that would have been good if they could have done that.
So apart from the dowsing, then, have you been on any of those kind of, what would you call them, excursions into properties, or you've just mentioned old churches and other historic buildings regarding the dowsing, or have you been on any other type of investigations?
I went along on a couple of paranormal investigations, probably about 10 or 15 years ago. Well, I think it was at the time when Most Haunted was at its height, and I found that they were more interested in the scream factor, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So,
I do. I did a few episodes with the lady from that show, And
Oh yeah, yeah.
they were interested in the excitement and the sort of thrill of it. But it's up to them, innit? But anyway, let's look at this this question from Martin Abbas. When you dowse, have you ever dowsed for ghosts, ETs, portals? Have you ever experienced anything?
We've never doused for ETs. We do find ghosts. We find portals. We find all sorts. It usually depends who's in the group and what their interests are. Like we might go into a church and somebody will say, "Oh, it feels a bit weird over in that corner," and we might all go and investigate. Some people might say, "Well, there's an energy line running through there that feels a bit off." Or somebody else who's interested in dowsing spirits may say, "Oh, I think there's a spirit over there," and they might like get the rod and say, "Point me to the nearest spirit," and it might point over there. So somebody might go over, and between us we tend to build up a picture. But I've never been dowsing with anybody who's dowsed for ETs.
No.
We do sometimes when people do the home healing, they do find that one of the causes of the disturbance in a house is what they would say is an open portal, and they'll try and close that portal. But I think the word portal, so it's a word that can mean all sorts, really,
Yeah.
whether it's portal to another realm, portal that the fae can come through, whatever. But one of the rules tends to be if you open up a portal to send a spirit to the light, to send it back, and you maybe calling the spirit's family to come and help, that you should always close the portal after you. Because sometimes you can find disturbances, like Adrian might find a disturbance because somebody's been in there and the portal stayed open.
Yeah, I see. And I find it fascinating, but I just think to myself, how do they know that they've opened it? I'm not calling these people, but how do they know that they've closed it? You've got the guy who's looking for spirits, who's interested in the dowsing, and you've got another person who's interested in the dowsing for a different reason. Could you all be right, but all be wrong at the same time? Could whatever you're looking for, and you're just bending it? Not you. I think we all do it, looking into the phenomena as regards the unexplained and bending it to fit the narrative that we're adhering to.
Yes, I mean it's only your best guess at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
With the home healing, the people who do the home healing, who Adrian's taught, they have a checklist of about 60 items, and they will work down that with the pendulum. So they might say what's causing the phenomena and go all the way down it, and it could be all sorts. And they might just get all the way down it. Then they ask the question, "Is there an open portal?" And the pendulum says yes. So that's how they work it out. It doesn't always just come into the minds. They literally do go down the checklists.
So we have another question here, another Steve Collins question. So my printer's just started printing something. I don't know what. If you can hear that, people. Right, Maeve, would you say it is safe for anyone to start doing it without someone who knows what they are doing?
I think anyone can do the basics of dowsing. Yeah, I mean, you just start off literally saying, "Show me my answer for yes," or "Show me my answer for no," or you can do it with the pendulum if you want. You show me for my answer for yes, and it might go round in a spiral, and the answer for no might go like this. But I think if you're interested in going further in dowsing, it's quite useful to either go on a course or you can join one of the local groups. Because the British Society of Dowsers cover the whole of Britain, but then there are a lot of what you call affiliated local groups. So you've got like the Ridings Dowsers in Yorkshire, there's the Cheshire Dowsers, the Westmoreland Dowsers up in Cumbria, there's some in Scotland, Wales, there's the Norfolk and Suffolk Dowsers, Sussex Dowsers, quite a few in the southwest, some in London, and quite often they'll usually go out on site maybe once a month. So if you go with them, there'll always be somebody who's willing to help you. Or the British Society of Dowsers run official courses if you want to go down that route.
But anybody who were interested in this and wanted to join, is it free to join?
Most dowsing groups will charge something like £15 for a year. They don't cost much. The British Society of Dowsers, I think that's about £50 for the year. But with that, you get a professional journal sent out 2 or 3 times a year.
Okay,
And
thank you.
also, we have an annual conference and an annual symposium where we have a weekend of talks and workshops.
Yeah. Right. Well, we've got a question here. So I see Gemma's in doing moderating for us. I'm not sure if Lee's in or Alison, but no doubt they'll join us shortly. There's TA, Magsu, we've done Dragonborn, Elaine. So let's just get this question from Dragonborn. So I have quite a few. I have quite a few of various sorts. I'd even use an antler pendant. Okay.
Oh, it's dowsing tools. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can use pretty much anything.
Okay.
I mean, a friend of mine actually demonstrated one day. She picked a long blade of grass and then she bent it in the shape of a dowsing rod, and she actually got it to answer yes/no questions. So I think, as you said, Paul, I think it's partly to do with what happens in the human body.
I think
mean,
I think it's got to be, you know, well, it's got to be. I sound like I know and I don't know. But I do know that myself and Mary, probably 10, 12 years ago, we went to Willie Howe one afternoon, lovely afternoon. And I'd made some dowsing rods out of one of daughter's as a musician, and she'd got an old music stand. So it naturally curved, and I'd cut them. I'd made 4 dowsing rods. And we went round Willie Howe and we staked where these rods had turned in. And no denying that something were happening, and I weren't turning them in and she weren't. And it was like an hot cross bun. Do you know? So there's definitely something there. So that was fascinating in itself. Do you find that there's running water near a lot of the times near active sites when you're dowsing?
Yeah, underground water, yeah. But quite often these sites are built on a crossing of underground streams where one goes that way and one goes that way. And that
Okay.
seems to create a vortex of energy, which sometimes can be what they would call a power centre, or the energy coming up from underground, because all running water creates an electromagnetic current. And it's these electromagnetic currents that we can douse on the surface when we're talking, saying we're dowsing earth energies.
I see.
You can also walk along and find out where the underground water is. You could do it with a pipe in your garden, or you can do it with underground water, and you walk along and you visualize the flowing water. And as you get near to it, your rods just turn in. And then as you get past it, they turn out again. And the feeling you get from the rods, it's like in one of those modern cars when you're driving it and it decides that you're too close to the white line and pushes you across. You can literally feel them coming in.
That were going to be a question, so I'm glad you've brought that up. I was going to say, do the rods just move in sort of without your aid, which they do? They did in the case of Willie Howe. But I was going to say, do you feel the energy transferred through into your body?
I think, to be honest, it goes the other way from the human body into the rod.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. Yep. Okay. Let's we're going to talk about the Woollerton gnomes shortly, but we'll get this question. And if there's a load of questions that I don't get through tonight, people, I apologize, because I'm just firing them as I see them. So, and they are in order, but I know we will not get through them all. Maeve, Raymond Grace used dowsing to exercise a possessed building. Have you ever been involved in any such case?
Yeah, Raymond Grace is the chap I was mentioning who uses a bullet as a pendulum. Actually, he's really, really good.
Okay.
Yeah, that can be done. I suppose what they do in the home healers do, like Adrian Incledon Webber, it's not exactly exercising a building, but it's going down this checklist of 60 items and find out what the problem is in the building, and then one by one going through and trying to resolve those. So it's similar in a way, because it can cure things like poltergeist activity, depending what the cause of the poltergeist activity was. But he will also look into the occupants of the home and sort of give them a bit of a health check, and he'll check for things like, do they have any negative attachments or entities attached to them or anything like that. But I think, as far from what I've heard about some poltergeist cases, it can be a pubescent teenager, in which case there's not a great deal dowsing can do about that.
No, because there's a lot of other things at play there, isn't there? And let's have a look at David Drummond. I think we touched on this actually. You can map douse as well. to look for lost objects such as ancient artifacts. That'd be fascinating, wouldn't you know, if you thought you could find can it be done for self-gain then? Because if you're looking for ancient artifacts
No.
or treasure,
it doesn't work. If you try and douse for lottery numbers, you'll just get skewed answers. It just doesn't work. And do you know one thing? A lot of dowsers have a lot of difficulty with is finding lost objects.
okay.
For some reason, I don't know if it's because when you've lost something like your car keys, you're very involved in finding them and that, and you get stressed. And quite often, when we're going to douse, we need to get ourselves into a
Relax.
calm, almost meditative state. And if you're stressed because you've lost something and you've got to leave the house shortly, you're not in that state. So it's very difficult to find the things like that. But yeah, I mean, you can use your dowsing. Well, dowsers do help archaeologists to find things to dig up and that. But it does seem to be that if you're using it for your own personal gain, whatever is giving you the answers, whether it's your subconscious, the collective unconscious spirits, or whatever, they give you skewed answers. It's almost like, that you can only use it so far.
Yeah, it's almost like there's an unspoken code within
Yeah,
whatever it is that resides at the other side. But
yeah.
what I'm taking from this, and I don't know about people in chat, but what I'm getting from this is that everything that we're dealing with is we're the conduit, not the rods. I know they're a tool that we're using, but everything's coming from us, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
There's a lot of water diviners now. They don't need to use the tools. They will use them if there's a paying client. They'll use the tools to demonstrate what they're doing, but they can actually do it with their arms because they'll be walking along and then they'll go over underground water and the hand will just go like that. It'll just jump up. There's some black and white videos on YouTube somewhere of people doing that and they're just walking along suddenly and that's where the water is.
And then do we have the evidence when they dug down that there's been water there?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm assuming, yeah.
If you go on a professional water divining course, they teach you how to use your rods and that to actually find where the water is. But then you have to use one of these pendulum charts to find things like what's the depth of the water, what's the flow rate of the water, is the water potable or drinkable, and that's how water diviners will then go out and tell a farmer where they could sink a borehole.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it was in Gallipoli, probably in the First World War, the British Army nearly had to pull out because they hadn't got enough water for the troops. And an Australian sapper went up to the general and he said, "I'm a water diviner. Will you let me try and find some water?" So they let him, and he actually found enough places to sink boreholes to keep the troops there.
Fabulous. It's fascinating. Yeah. It must be really, really frustrating. I know we're jumping to science again because they haven't got an answer for how it's happening, and people are paying good money to employ water diviners and other talents that these people have to discover things. And we just don't know how it's done really. But I think we just so underestimate the power of what's inside here, don't we? Because it's got to be, it's all coming from the mind, isn't it? And it's truthful results at the time. So let's have a look. This is somebody just giving you a bit of praise. I love Mave. She's a very interesting lady, and I get a good feeling from her. Thank you, Ginge.
Thank you very much.
That's nice. And then we'll have this one. Let's have a look. Scotch Miss. I've seen scientific tests where dowsers didn't detect water or other substances more than chance. I was very disappointed. Any comments? Scientific tests. Well, I suppose you're going to get that. I mean, not everything can be plus. Where you've got your pluses, you're going to have your minuses. But we have to put the questions up. So, yeah, scientific tests where dowsers didn't detect water. And that's going to be there, I suppose, yeah. But having said that...
There's two types of dowsing, actually. There's the mental dowsing, where you're asking questions, like you're going down a checklist, and is it this, is it that, is it the other? Or you're asking a question and you're trying to get your rods to say, like you might say, I don't know, is this light I've just seen connected to plasma, and it might answer yes or no, and you might get the wrong answer. And they say that mental dowsing's probably only about 70% accurate, partly because it depends on you asking the right question.
I
Because
see.
your question might have an inherent assumption in it that's wrong. I mean, if you ask a basic question, you're probably okay. Like if I say, is my name Mave? I'll get a yes, and is my name Fred? I'll get a no. But then if I ask it a question based on an assumption I've made that's wrong, it can't
Yeah,
answer me.
fascinating. What do you think we're working with, Maeve? What is it what's working with us alongside of us? What do you think it is?
I don't know. I think whatever it is, I think comes through our subconscious, but I don't know what it is. It's probably part of this whole phenomena, which seems to have many different aspects to it.
Yeah, but, because you've already said, you can't. It doesn't seem to work for monetary gain or discoveries
No.
of something that is of wealth. So yeah. What about dowsing? I don't mean literally dowsing for missing people, but have they used it in cases where people have gone missing?
Yeah, they've been used quite a bit. We often get requests into dowsing groups to say somebody's gone missing or their pet's gone missing, and can people try and help?
And sometimes, obviously, you get a result. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes, but sometimes you'll get 2 or 3 people all come up with slightly different answers.
Okay.
So yeah, I find dowsing, when you're dowsing for something like underground water, minerals or oil, things like that, it tends to be very accurate. But then when you get into more of the esoteric, it seems to be slightly less accurate.
Okay. Thank you.
Or probably more open to interpretation. It's
Yeah.
pretty good when you're doing things like dowsing for food intolerances and things like that.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
I ain't got
there's
many
a
of
lot of
them.
people. Yeah, there's
No.
quite a few dowsers that have food intolerances, and what they're able to do is when there's some food in front of them. I mean, one of the things you can do to get a yes and no answer without having to use a rod or a pendulum, if you loop your fingers together like this, and then if you say something like, "Is my name Maeve?" and I try and pull the 2 loops apart, I can't pull them apart. But if I say, "Is my name Fred?" they pull apart. And you can do this over food. So if you've got some food in front of you and you're not sure if you're going to be able to tolerate that food, or if it's going to make you ill, you put your thumb and your first finger together, make your 2 loops, and try and pull them apart over that food. If they won't pull apart, you're okay to eat it. If they pull apart, it's literally broken a circuit in your body. And that's why they can pull apart. It's called muscle testing. So you can do something like that just
I
to find
might
out.
try this on
Yeah,
grandkids next time I'm getting them to eat sprouts. I'm gonna just,
might backfire on you.
yeah. So right, we'll try this question. Let's have a look, Tim. How do you guard against your words, thoughts, inciting subconscious movements, and what's the dowsing case stroke events that amazed you the most? Well, we're probably going to talk about a few of those shortly, but is there any of that you want to touch on now, Maeve? Or...
Yeah, I mean, what you're needing to do when you're dowsing is basically get yourself into a semi-meditative state and basically empty your mind. And I think sometimes when you get inaccurate answers, it's because your mind hasn't been emptied, and exactly like they're saying here, your words and thoughts are getting in the way. So you try and get yourself in this meditative, quiet state and formulate your questions and set your intents. And if you're dowsing for something specific, like you want to douse for the gas pipe in your garden, you get everything else out your mind and you visualize a pipe with gas in it. And then you walk forward with your rods until they cross. But if you've got lots of things in your mind, like you've said, you were walking along the rods crossed, but you didn't know why. You basically got to start thinking, what are you looking for? And then it gets a bit more accurate.
So
But
obviously,
yeah,
the
I
most
think the
amazing
case
case.
is that amazing. Yeah, that's what we've got to talk about
Yeah,
next, I think.
we will jump onto that one in a moment, and we'll just see whether there's a few more. Let's have a look. Studio. 211 Productions. Is there any material used for the rods that works better than others, or is this irrelevant and the rods merely being an antenna as such?
Some people prefer something like copper rods, whereas some people will use absolutely anything. I think it's down to the individual what they work best with. But if you're looking for something specific, like if people are looking for a certain mineral or whatever, it might be better to use a copper rod. But generally, I find people just use whatever suits them.
But it's got to be something, some natural substance. I sound joking here, aren't I? But you couldn't use a stick of rhubarb, could you? That wouldn't work, would it? Do you know what I mean? It's got to.
I've never tried.
No, but do you know what I mean? Would a metal based? Would they be better metal based?
Most Dowsers tend to use metal ones, but
Right.
yeah, but like a pendulum, people can use literally anything on a chain. So I think this one's probably brass, but
Yeah.
people will use a crystal on the end, or like I said, Rainham and Grace will have a bullet on the end. So
And it's just what you would prefer.
It's what you're drawn to, really.
Yeah, this is it's fascinating, honestly, because we've never talked about anything like this, and I'm sure it'll be something that some people in chat might want to have a little go at. Let's have a look at Dave Barker's question. Do you prefer dowsing inside or out in the open?
Both.
Okay.
The only thing we've been out in the open, if you're using tools, if it's windy, I mean, when you're up on the cliff-tops at Bempton, in the middle of the night, using tools probably is not going to be much of an option because they're going to blow all over the place. But yeah, that was both inside and out.
Yeah, but you know, Bob Brown, who comes on cliff tops, as I made them dowsing rods with the music stand, but Bob bought a couple of sets of dowsing rods and gave me one. But a lot of the time, and I think, I'm not sure if Ian, somebody else has got some up there, but a lot of the time, it's never that still that you could use them.
Yeah.
Because it would be interesting. Because you've sent us off, you're sending my mind off in different directions. Because, as I say, green as grass, I knew nothing about this. So you could actually douse for a presence. You could douse. Do you know some kind of earth energy? So that's fascinating, and I'm sure it'd interest some people that go up there with us.
Yeah,
so
I mean, if you're up there and you think there's a presence with you, I mean, you could just use this technique, yes/no technique like this, and just say, "Is there a presence with us?" And it'll either come up with yes or no.
Yeah, and please don't think I'm being disrespectful there, but how would we trust ourselves? How do we know? And I'd be thinking to myself, are they just doing that? I know you've got to place faith in individuals, but
yeah,
I don't know. I'm sort of being negative about what you're saying there, but it's difficult, isn't it?
You're right. If you can't experience something for yourself, you can't just say, yeah, it does work. You've got to experience it for yourself to appreciate it and know that it does work.
So there's a question here, and I'm not sure you're going to have an answer to this. Which portal have you found, and may I ask, where is it, and how would you open it?
I don't think you said. I
don't think you said you found one, did you? You didn't say you found one, did you? Say
it's when people are doing home healing and they go down the checklist and they might get told that there's a portal open in that particular house. But a lot of the times that somebody who's doing the home healing and is doing the part where you're trying to sort the house out, you literally call on your own spirit guides and angels to help you. And so you might set the intent that that portal is closed, but you're actually handing it over to your own spirit guides and angels to do it, basically do the work for you. And you always say, if this is for the highest and greatest good, because if you're asking for some portal to be closed that for some reason the other world doesn't want closed, then it won't get closed.
Okay.
So you sort of, you're almost handing it over to the divine.
Let's have a look what Jane. I didn't realise we'd get as many questions as this. So before we get to 8 o'clock, and then we'll go. Mave, when you have found portals, another portal one. Are they normally in remote areas?
No. It could be anywhere. I mean, you can get small portals. But I found portals in trees where the fae can come in and out, and so it could be a small portal or it could be a huge portal through to another universe.
Okay,
I
thank
mean,
you.
to be honest, it's something we don't understand a lot about. We're just guessing.
Yep. So we'll have a go at this one, Rick Bennett. Mave, Jimmy Longton from my town has dowsed for the royal family and archaeologists. Have you ever had a high-profile request?
I haven't personally, but I know there are members of the British Society of Dowsers who have. But they tend to be very discreet, so they'll just tell us. They might tell us a story that they went to douse for somebody high profile, but they wouldn't tell you the name.
Just sort of masking
just to
their
preserve
identity.
these people's privacy.
Yeah. Let's just see whether we get any more before we have a look at these. Lisa, let's have a look. Can you recommend any good rods to use, please? And not to stick a rhubarb, Lisa, like Paul said. But,
well, these particular ones, these are brass ones, and I actually bought them from a website called Penwith Press, and that's down in Cornwall, and I think they're distributed by the widow of a famous dowser, Hamish Miller, and he was a blacksmith and he used to make them, and these are copper rods. They only cost me about £12 for the pair.
okay.
But yeah, you can get them all over the place. If you get in contact with the British Society of Dowsers, they sell them. We sell them at conferences and symposiums. And you can get in touch with one of your local dowsing groups as well. They can often recommend whatever's best for you.
Let's have a look at this. Tony D. Hello, everyone, and hello, Tony. Have you or any of the groups done any work on crop circles, and what were the outcomes? That's an interesting question.
I personally haven't. It's one thing I'm interested in, but I've got absolutely no answer for. But I've known dowsers who have gone out into crop circles, but off the top of my head, I don't know what they've found.
No, but it's fascinating. I was contacted this week by a chap, Malcolm, who's done a lot of work on crop circles, and I want him to come on and start and have a discussion on here about what he's found and what he's discovered. And I know he's contacted Ross Coulthard earlier in the week about some information. So that would be interesting because he's like at the top of the game finding people. So if he gets to talk with him, we might find out a little bit more. But there must be some kind of energy regarding the crop circles. There's got to be something, and the reason for the crop circles, and I don't mean the ones where people go with a rope and a board in a field and create them themselves, because I do think that there's something there with crop circles. Some of them, I mean, I only speak for myself, but the one I got to look at years ago out at Rudston, nobody got to see. I only got to see on the word that I didn't talk about it. Okay, guys, I'm talking about it now, but we're going back 10, 15 years. Do you know what I mean? And they still don't know where it is, do you? So, we'll get on to the Woollerton.
The best book I read on crop circles was by a chap called Freddie Silver. It's Freddie and then Silver, Silva. And I think he was part of groups that investigated crop circles about 20 or 30 years ago. And to me, that was the most sensible one. And he'd been there and watched some being formed and that. So if anybody's interested, it's worth finding that. I think it's called Circles in the Field. But if you Google Freddie Silver, Silva, you should be able to find it.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating because there's when all the strangeness was happening around Wilsthorpe back in 2009, I spoke to a farmer, and I'll not go into the story, not the full story, but a crop circle appeared on his farm, literally within line of where the flats were at Wilsthorpe, where the occupants of the flats observed the UFOs over the sea, and he talked about it being colder when he entered the crop circle. It absolutely clapped cold, and it was a red hot day. And I thought to myself, who would have known that? He was high up in a combined harvester. So I wonder if there is some kind of colder air pocket above crop circles. I don't know. Fascinating. So we'll do one more question. Let's have a look at this. Jan and Andrew, Malcolm 89, missing man from in Easington. Can a dowser nearby help find him? Ugh, I can't answer that, Jan and Andrew. I don't know.
Sometimes dowsers can. Yeah, it's occasionally you get dowsers working with the police looking for missing people and that. Although it tends to be kept sort of pretty low profile. But occasionally, yeah, you probably need to contact one of the local dowsing groups and see if anybody's willing to.
Do you think
Oh,
that's frustrating, Maeve? That let's assume that the police have reached out to dowsers or reached out to a remote viewer, not in some instances, and yet it's kept low profile. Is that because they would be seen as being unprofessional, asking people for something?
yeah, I think so. I mean, some of the water companies these days, they're having to keep the fact that they use dowsing rods as a low profile because people are accusing them of using witchcraft or whatever, even though dowsing for a water leak saves them an awful lot of time.
Yeah. Is dowsing, or has it ever been connected to the occult?
Um, it in the dowsing groups, that's something we would keep away from. But
Oh, absolutely. I'm not
I dare
suggesting.
say it might have been.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not something I really know about.
yeah. That's fine. Yeah, yeah. Okay. I'm trying to make it right up to 8 o'clock before we start on the gnomes. So we're gonna right. Dave Barker again. Seen on a documentary, people do this and find precious minerals. Ever been asked? Okay. So
I haven't
obviously
been
that would
asked
be for wealth.
personally.
That would be for wealth, Maeve, wouldn't it? If people have found
Yeah,
precious minerals.
yeah, but I've not been asked personally, but I'm sure other dowsers have.
Oh, I don't think we've got that many precious minerals here in UK, have we? Coal. That's not really a
Yeah,
precious mineral, but
yeah,
but other than that, let's have a look. One more. Let's do this. That makes sense, Harry. Clearing your mind first. Yeah, I think it's all about the
yeah.
mind. To be honest with you, Tim, 1937. It really is. And before we jump to that, because I'll forget otherwise, just a little word on the Truth Proof books and the documentary. The books are available truthproof.uk, and if it's an overseas sale, please use the eBay link. Then it can go through global shipping. The Wolflands documentary, exactly the same. Truthproof.uk for an hard copy. And as I say every week, if I get an order, I think we've got two actually. They'll be going in morning, and that's also available Amazon Prime download. That's the film that myself and Les made, Les Drake. So we're quite pleased with that, and the books are also on Amazon Kindle. And let's move on to unless you want to tell us anything where people can contact you, Maeve, or the group. I don't know.
Well, there's the British Society of Dowsers that you can. They've got website and Facebook pages, and a lot of the local groups also have websites and Facebook pages, like the Ridings Dowsers for Yorkshire, the Cheshire Dowsers, the Westmoreland Dowsers. So, yeah, just Google for a group.
Okay.
And I think there are more informal groups on Facebook as well that aren't affiliated to the British Society of Dowsers. They're more just people who go out dowsing together now and again.
All right. Okay. Thank you. So let's tell us about how dowsing was used to investigate the case of the children. Was it the trespassing children that?
Yeah, yeah. First, I just want to say on Sunday you had Steve on,
Yep.
and I was amazed when he said about in 1974 he'd witnessed a little man near Willie Howe, and he'd actually said it was like a crinkled faced little man
A bit like me.
because that reminds me of this case in 1979 where children trespassing in the grounds of Woollerton Park in Nottingham actually witnessed what they said were little men in floating cars. And I didn't know anything about this. And then I think it would be about 3 years ago, a friend of mine, Dan Green, who describes himself as a researcher into high strangeness, he told me about it and he said, "Can you use dowsing to investigate this?" So at first I just said, "I don't know how we'd do it." But in the end, I thought, yeah, I'll give it a go then. And I looked into the case. and it would be this particular encounter was actually on the autumn equinox in September 1979. And these children, they were in the grounds of Woollerton Park, and I think they'd strayed into a swampy area and got through a fence into some bushes, and they saw some strange lights. And they seemed to think that these strange lights morphed into little men driving floating cars. And this was a Sunday night, and they went to school the next day, and there was about 4 or 6 children, I think. And they all went to the same school, and they were telling the school friends and the teachers about it. And unusually, the headmaster, instead of just sort of giving them all a good hiding for making up tall stories, he took them seriously, and he interviewed them all one by one, and they tape recorded the interviews of what they came up with. And he said that their stories pretty much tallied. He said he'd no explanation for what they saw, but he actually thought they were discussing a genuine encounter. And I think it was because this headmaster had really reached out and tried to believe these children that I thought, well, it's got to be worth investigating this case, because I mean there'll be a lot of people in the chat now, and there's a lot of people I know in the dowsing groups who have witnessed things when they were young, and they were either ridiculed, given a good hiding because of it, or told not to talk about it. So I thought, well, this headmaster tried to take them seriously, and the reports actually ended up in the papers. And then they got passed on to a lady called Marjorie Johnson, and she was secretary of the Fairy Investigation Society that was based in Nottingham. And she was psychic herself, and she had seen fairies in Woollerton Park, so she took the kids seriously as well. And she actually wrote a book called Seeing Fairies, but it was never published in her lifetime, and she died at the age of 100 in 2011. And a chap called Simon Young, who is now the Fairy, I think he's the Fairy Investigation Society, he actually published her book posthumously after she died. And in that book, there is a whole chapter on what got called the Woollerton Gnomes case. And so I went off to Woollerton Park. I'd arranged to meet some other Dowsers there, but I thought I'll go on my own a couple of weeks before first. And so I got there, and I thought, well, I'd read that a lot of people were investigating this case because Dan Green had got a lot of different people involved. It included Joe Hickey Hall, who I know's quite well known to Truth Proof.
Yeah.
And a lot of them have been trying to work out where in the park the encounter took place. And I decided that, well, rather than do that, I'm going to ask where in the park can I be taken to find out more about this phenomena. So I literally asked my rods, take me to where I can find out more. And they took me to near the lake, because in Woollerton Park, right in the middle, there's a sandstone mound, and standing on that is Woollerton Hall. Woollerton Hall looks very much like the hall that they used in Downton Abbey. It's actually built to the same blueprints and everything. And then there's this 500-acre deer park around it, and there's a lake at one side. And so my rods took me down to this lake, and I was using the rods to ask yes/no questions that, were any gnomes sighted here? And I got ambiguous answer for that. And then I realised that the children had never used the word gnomes. They only called them little men, and at one time, one of them said they looked a bit like a dwarf. So I got my rods to take me, and I went up to some trees. And one thing that dowsers do is actually talk to trees, because trees have a consciousness and you can actually communicate with them. The trees have also got an aura which you can douse with your hands, just like humans have. So using the yes/no questions, I actually asked the trees, have children ever witnessed a phenomena here that appeared to be like little men in floating cars, and I got a yes for this. And so I sort of asked to be shown how it happened. And at the back of the lake is a mound. And funnily enough, not long, he's picking a book up here, not long before that, some of us in the Dowsers had started looking into the Fae and nature things, which is why we'd started dowsing trees. And we'd read a book called The Land of the Fae, Merlin's Quest by Rob Wildwood. And Rob Wildwood has gone to a lot of places where they're supposed to be associated with the Fae and had experiences. And he talked about places that he calls fairy mounds. And I looked at this mound behind the lake, and probably because I had it in my head from reading the book, I'm thinking that looks like a fairy mound. So I decided to walk up onto the mound. And several people who'd sort of helped with this, what we were calling nature dowsing, had said that the fairies like things like, well, a friend of mine had made this, what it's called a fairy stick. And this friend has been able to see nature spirits all her life. So she knows they exist. And it's just a stick it's got lots of pictures. It's got like orbs and leaves and butterflies on. And she said that attracts them. Also, a fluorite crystal does, and honey. And they also apparently are drawn to these shells. So I'd taken these things with me, and at the time I knew nothing about dowsing or the Fae really, so I was sort of just going with my intuition. So I walked up onto this mound, and I filled a shell with honey, and I lent this stick alongside a fallen tree, and I sort of got myself into this semi-meditative state. And we also often say a blessing to sort of give respect to the Fae or whatever unseen beings are around. And what we say is, kindly luminous beings, guardians of this place, I'm here in love and peace, and I ask for your blessings, protection, love, and hospitality while I'm in this space. So I leaned on this tree trunk, so I got myself in a semi-meditative state that you'd use to douse. And I felt like I was in a liminal place. And it wasn't till a few weeks after, when I looked at a geological map, it turned out that that mound was right over a geological fault. And I think that's why I felt I was in a liminal place. But as I stood there, I started to sort of make out of the corner of my eye, I could almost make out an orb sort of floating around. Now, I don't see these clairvoyantly. I can just sort of make out a thickness in the atmosphere that seems to be spherical shaped. And they kept appearing from one side and that. And then gradually it seemed like that they morphed. It looked like a little fairy, or what we see as the archetypal fairy. It like morph in the middle of this sphere. And eventually this larger sphere appeared in front of me, and I felt like it was green tinged, but as I say, I'm not clairvoyant. What I do, I feel the thickness in the atmosphere, and then I get a picture in my mind's eye, almost of what this orb wants me to think it looks like. And I felt that it had morphed into a sort of elf-like creature about the same size as me. And in my mind's eye, I sort of got an elf or something. And I couldn't quite work all this out. And I also got the impression that I needed to pick up an oak leaf because it was autumn. So I picked up this oak leaf, and I was told in my mind that I must keep hold of this oak leaf while I was here. And I didn't know why. I just assumed it was so I didn't end up in a time slip or even getting taken by the fairies or something. But it was a really strange experience. They never appeared to morph into gnomes or anything like that. But when I got home, I'd had a message from my friend Dan Green, and he'd sent me a link to a YouTube that I think it was called Conversations with Pan. And I'm thinking, Pan. And I'm Googling away, and suddenly up came an image of Peter Pan. And I thought, that's what that orb morphed into. It was Peter Pan. And I remembered that when I was a child, I was given what, you used to get like a little book with a 45 record in it that you could play. And I got one with the story of Peter Pan in, and I used to play it over and over, play the record, and I'd read the book. And I remember it saying, when Tinkerbell rings a little bell, it's time to turn the page. And I started to think, did this orb appear to morph into something like Peter Pan? Because it pulled this out of my subconscious, because it knew that that is something that I could rationalize without being scared. And that got me to thinking, well, these children claim that they saw these little men driving cars. And they were in the era when Noddy and Big Ears were popular. And also, the fair used to come to Woollerton Park twice a year, so they would be familiar with fairground dodgems. And is that why the minds of 8 to 10-year-old children rationalised these things as something that looked similar to Noddy and Big Ears, little men driving floating cars? So I'd asked to be taken to somewhere where I could get a handle on what the phenomena was. And that's the experience that I had that day.
And do you know, as crazy as it sounds, there's a lot of similarities there to the alien abduction scenario as well.
Yeah.
And children, there'll be people in chat who'll remember the Spielberg series called Taken. And I think it was Dakota Fanning that, so see how long back we're going. She was a little girl who was the sort of child star of the program or the series. And in her abduction scenario or scenes, she was seen walking away with Squirrel Nutkin, because the writer, the filmmaker, were trying to put her in that position where these things were presenting as something else, which would pacify her. Whitley Strieber saw owls. That there's a lot of similarities there. I wonder, you've talked about the Fae, and I've spoken about the Fae myself. We talk about alien abduction scenarios, but I think we're all dealing with the same thing myself here. I think it's just morphing into what our belief system wants it to be, almost. But yeah, it's fascinating. So what was the result of that? Did you bring other people in then?
Yeah, I went back a couple of weeks later, and there were 2 or 3 of us then. And that's when we started doing some earth energy dowsing, and we realised that there was a sundial behind Woollerton Hall from which radiated about 10 lines of energy. And it turned out that there used to be a dowsing group called the East Midlands Dowsers. So they're now defunct, but 10 years ago they were quite busy, and they used to use Woollerton Hall as a training ground, so they knew a lot about it. And we followed one of these energy lines, and they just picked this at random. I didn't tell them which way to go, and this energy line actually took us to the place where I'd had this experience a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
And what we were finding was that these energy lines that came down from the hall, they hit another energy line at the base of what I was calling the fairy mound, and that was creating an energetic disturbance. Then what we felt was that these orbs, when they were around, and some of them actually seemed to come out of the holes in the bases of trees, and we felt that when these orbs were around, they could literally ride on the energy lines around the park, and that could be why the children were seeing them in different places.
Go on, Nave. Sorry.
We've actually got transcripts of the children's accounts, and when I read them, it wasn't long after I'd read your Truth Proof books, and I started noticing a lot of similarities. But it wasn't, I'm not saying that what they saw were ILFs, but what I'm saying is that there were similar behavioural patterns, because some of the things the kids actually said was, when we looked up, there was a light in the trees, because this happened after dusk. So in theory, it was dark. It was September. They shouldn't have been able to see them, but they could see a light in the trees. And then one of them said you could see them in the dark. They showed up. some said some were up in the trees and some were on the ground. And then they said when we went into the trees, they went back in. And when we went away from the trees, they came back out again. And when they came out, we seen a light in the trees hanging, and we could see the faces. And they said they kept chasing us. They were very fast. Another one said they don't come out in the light. And when they were asked how the cars moved, the children said they could kind of jump over the logs. And when I was reading your books, it seemed that that's the behavioural pattern that often these
It-
illuminated light forms take.
Yeah,
So
so many similarities. Do you know,
yeah,
years ago, 2007 and 8, myself and Steve Ashbridge, as I've said many times, used to go into Wolds, the East Yorkshire Wolds. Not far from Willie Howe and these other places that have got similarities to what you're talking about. But we used to talk about, and we were looking for these huge orange spheres of light that would appear, and we'd get the farmer at Staxton. He'd be on the phone to us saying they're there now, and we'd be saying, yeah, we can see him, and we'd be 4 or 5 miles away from him, and he's watching them. But what we've often said, we never really made enough of it. Where we used to park, there'd be a row of hawthorn and other trees growing down the side of the road, and you're in the middle of nowhere, so roads aren't very active. And we'd see what we called hedge lights. That's exactly what me and Steve called them. And they were almost translucent, but you could see them. You weren't imagining, do I think there's lights in the trees, little translucent, almost gossamer type lights. So much so that Steve would go down into the field, and I'm trying to film it. I can't see them with camera. Weird, we can see, but we can both see them. And because they're not really bright, they're sort of almost translucent. And when he got there, they disappeared. But so, like you said, when he came back, they're back again. It were really strange. And that I think the turn off where we were parked were a place called Buttercram when we saw them. It might have been Butterwick. If Linny's in chat, I think I mentioned it to him a few weeks ago. He'll remember which road it is because he's good with roads. It's just off from a place called Octon anyway, as you're on Sledmere Road. And they were there, and we never made enough of them. And then you talked about the little cars, and that's some kind of image that's been placed in them children's minds, in my opinion. Doesn't make it any less real, but it's been placed in their minds for some reason. And there were a lady, former hairdresser at Filey, still with us, and I know her son, and she used to get to speak to. I've talked about this before. All the lifeboat men, fishermen, police, back in the day, we're going back like 40, 50 years, they'd all come in for their hair cut or ladies for their hair done, and she'd get lots of information, and she were interested in unexplained. But she'd had one experience herself where her husband and their son were walking along not the Filey brig, but along the top, looking down onto the brig. And they saw a vehicle, and I've wrote about it, I don't know which book it's in, but they saw a vehicle that weren't a Land Rover, but it weren't a bus. They can't work out what they were looking at. And they could see all the people inside it, rows of people through all the glass windows. Now, if you're not familiar, people, with Filey Brig, you can't drive a vehicle across Filey Brig. There's great big gaps, and you can get cut off by tide if you go out on it, and it drops down 6 foot or 4 foot and goes up. It stretches a mile out to sea. And at high tide, you don't know it's there, and it's been the site of many shipwrecks over centuries. But at low tide, people like to walk on Filey Brig, but they're looking down at Filey Brig, and this vehicle's riding along top, which is impossible. Absolute, you couldn't do it on a motorbike, a trial bike. You couldn't. It's just impossible. But it drove along top and just dropped off end into water and disappeared. Another crazy story, just like the little men in cars. Something showing us things that are almost pacifying us and giving us what it thinks we want, not to be either alarmed or not to. I don't know what the reasons are. There could be a multitude of reasons, but that's fascinating, Maeve. And
some of the children said they were joyful and they were laughing, but some of the children were scared. It was like not all of them have the same experience. And when you actually read the children's accounts, I mean, they were all saying there were little men in cars but some of them said there were different colours and that. So there were very slight differences, which to me makes it a bit more real. Because if
Yeah,
they'd seen absolutely the same thing, you could have said they were making it up. But
yeah.
because they'd all seen something slightly different, yeah, it makes it more credible to me.
You
But
can't, but you
yeah,
can't win anyway, can you? Regardless of what we talk about within these subjects, because people will turn that on its head and say, "Well, if they didn't all say the same thing, they're obviously making it up because they can't agree on what we're saying." And
yeah.
do you know you can't win, Maeve? But
Well, the headmaster looked into it. I mean, headmasters are usually pretty well respected, and he said that he doesn't know what the phenomena was, but he's convinced that the children were talking about an actual experience that they'd had.
yeah, and so
And
so
apparently, it wasn't the first time they'd saw them. They'd seen, one of the little boys said they'd seen them in the 6 weeks holidays, but they'd only seen them from a distance. Whereas on this September occasion, they'd actually come out of the trees and the children said they were chasing them.
yeah. Do you think it's possible? I mean, you're talking about this now. Obviously, you're not there. But if it stirred interest for people and they went there, do you think they can revive the phenomena? Somehow would like wake it up.
Well, there's a group that do go and do that. I think for the last couple of spring equinoxes, because Simon Young published this book, and it's called The Wollerton Gnomes, a Nottinghamshire fairy mystery. And he got, I think there was about 10 of us to write essays in it. And I wrote one about the experience I've told you about. Dan Green wrote a synopsis of the Dowsing because it was him who asked the Dowsers to do it. But there were other people who wrote in it. There was Joe Hickey Hall, who you know, Kate Hairgirl Ray, who does the Hair in the Hawthorne podcast, Neil Rushton, the folklorist, who does the podcast with her. And for the last couple of autumn equinoxes, they've actually been to Wollerton Park and tried to recreate what happened. And I think if you have a look on YouTube under Wollerton Gnomes, you'll find some things that they did. I think it was possibly on Joe Hickey Hall's Modern Fairy Sightings podcast.
Okay,
And they did invite me, but I've never been available at the time when they've gone. But yeah, one of these days I might get there.
I'm
But
sure.
what I liked about it was like with this, there's essays from about 10 people. And everybody who looked into it from their own perspective. Like I was looking at it through Dowsing. There was a Nottinghamshire historian who sadly just passed, Frank Earp. He looked at it from a historical perspective. Neil Rushton looks at it from the folklorist perspective. Joe Hickey Hall from the Fae perspective. So yeah, and I like that because everybody's looking at it from a different perspective and finding slightly different things.
Well, they're going to do, aren't they? But and it's good, providing that they can accept somebody else's perspective and not downplay it and thinking, no, it's my way or no way. Because you get a lot of
Yeah,
that within ufology. Yeah, you know, a lot of people think, well, this
yeah.
is the way it is, and that's it, set in stone. I'm not going to change my mind. So it's good if you can all agree to disagree.
You've got to be open-minded, and
Yeah, absolutely.
I think when we go out in a group with the Dowsers, if everybody comes at it from a different perspective, then we can build up a bigger picture.
Yeah. So I've
But
got a.
this
Oh, sorry, go on, Maeve.
this Marjorie Johnson, who wrote the book Seeing Fairies, she actually put a couple of things in about her own impressions of the encounter. And one of the things she said, because she could see fairies herself, was that nature spirits have the power to visualize and create out of universal thought substance a simple etheric imitation of anything that takes their fancy.
Mm.
Which is almost what we're saying. If they start off as orbs, and then they can morph into
Well,
whatever takes their fancy.
there'll be people in chat who will have heard me say, and I don't think I'm breaking new ground here, but I don't know who else has said this, but well, in a way, that's what's being said. What if the Fae are responsible for a lot of what people are seeing and experiencing? As in nature spirits, because you know, if you're bound and tied to the land and you've been there not just hundreds, thousands of years, and suddenly people come in and start setting fires on it, which is what, even if it's a small fire, you're setting fire onto their land, and you sat there drinking and shouting through the night. And then if they could take the shape of any form they wanted, so they presented as some terrifying cryptid, you would leave, wouldn't you? You know, it'd be the quickest way to. It just makes you wonder, doesn't it? You know, if that's what's happening. Before we do any more, I've two pictures here. Are these the actual children's pictures that they drew?
Yeah.
Let's just have a look at these. So these are from 1970?
1979. Yeah, that they actually ended up in the newspapers.
So
That's one of the little men. It's interesting because in both pictures the children drew trees, and they'd said they'd seen lights in the trees.
okay,
And I'd also thought that the orbs had possibly come out of the holes in the tree trunks.
Right.
That's what they drew.
So this is from the 1970s. It's
two different children.
Yeah, I see. Thank you. So is there any more to add to that, Maeve? Because we can do a few questions and then we'll go up to the fairy mound.
Yeah, there's just a couple more things that Marjorie Johnson of Seeing Fairies said. And she was writing this probably 40 or 50 years ago. And she said, fairy visions are often coloured by something in the seer's own personality. And the materialised bodies of nature spirits are self-luminous, which again makes them sound like the ILF phenomena.
Yeah, absolutely.
Similar behavioural traits. I'm not saying it's exactly the same thing.
No, I think you could be onto it.
Responds in the same way.
Yeah, I think it could be exactly the same thing. I wouldn't discount it. You know, because I simply don't know. But yeah, that you could see the similarities. I mean, you told me that a few years ago, and not that passage that you read, but you did say that you think there's similarities. So let's just have a look here. Any more on? Don't want to cut you off there. Shall we take a few questions?
I think that's about it on the Woollerton Gnomes.
Right. So these might be quick. I don't know, but just take as much time as you like. Let's have a look. Tony Worrell, Maeve, has Maeve visited any places down south, and what did she think was the most powerful?
I occasionally get down south. Probably the most powerful would be Avebury. We were down there a couple of weeks ago. There was actually the chap I mentioned from Richmond, Adrian Incledon Webber. He did a conference down there, so a lot of us went down. But it's probably the most powerful. Avebury, you can find virtually an example of anything that you want to investigate, anything unseen. It seems to be there. It's almost like a big university for investigating things.
Okay, let's have a look at this. Steve Collin again. I always take honey and homemade offering. I'd probably eat it, me, Steve, to will it out and say my thank yous to the Fae for allowing me to.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah. Okay. I think if you can pay respect to them, it means so much that they'll respect you back.
Okay, I'm just running down here because there's probably is questions here, but they're not in capitals, so I'm missing them. Now we've got one from Linny. Let's have a look. I Maeve, the headmaster that was killed in your house. Do you know what happened to him? She does, Linny, but we probably can't say it on air. Trust him to ask that question. Let's just say it wasn't very nice, was it, Maeve?
No, he was killed by his son.
Yeah.
In not a very nice way.
Because he was a cruel person. We kind of went through that prior to jumping on us. See, Alison's in helping with moderating. Thanks, Alison. And Lee's there. Sorry for not saying it earlier. I didn't see you guys earlier. DM Moon. Let's have a look. Pete's in. Good to see you now, Pete. Thudder, Tony Worrell, Liam. And let's just get rid of Lenny's question, and we'll just go down a little bit more because I want to get to. Of all places, Pudding Pie Hill. That's where we're going next.
Yep.
So let's have a look. Let's have a look. People need to look at right. Let's have a look. Right, let's have a look. There we go. People need to look at the Jet report, the Broxtowe files, and the link to the tunnels at Woollerton Hall. Okay.
All right.
There might be something for you to look at there, Maeve, you know. And thanks, Mr. X. Thank you very much.
tunnels underneath because it's like most of Nottingham. It's on sandstone, and there's a lot of tunnels and caves under there.
because
It's
of the
also on top of
softness.
toll measures as well. In fact,
Yeah.
Wollerton Hall itself is very paranormally active.
Okay. So just before we move on to us, what about places in East Yorkshire? I don't mean you might have visited, such as the Rudston Monolith and other places.
Yeah, the riding Dowsers get to the Rudston Monolith quite often, actually. I think I've been a couple of times with them. And we usually combine it with the Rudston Monolith, Sledmere Church, and Duggleby Howe.
Now, Duggleby Howe is an interesting one. I've got a friend who lives within eyeshot of Duggleby Howe, and they've seen all sorts of spheres of light, such as what we've just discussed, the ILFs, and what they described as a flying saucer over Duggleby Howe. And they used to live in Caton, just on outskirts of Caton, but they've moved there now, and they've had some incredible sightings. We've been and visited them a few times, and he's told us about it. Be great to have them on live stream actually, and let them share a few of their things. But Chris Turner met them as well when we did Bringing Down the Light, so that were interesting. Let's one more question here. Let's just have a look here, and we've got Jane. Mave, do you think UFOs, ghosts, men in black, all eye strangeness are all the same?
I honestly don't know. I
No.
honestly don't know.
No, well, that's
sometimes you get. All I can say is I can see similar behavioural traits between some things like the Wollerton phenomena and the ILFs, but yeah, a lot of these things I haven't experienced in the same way that people in the chat and yourself has, and I think it's harder to investigate something you haven't experienced yourself.
Yeah, I think your answer just then is the best answer. If we don't know, we don't know, do we? There's a load of it, but thanks for that. So let's we've done we haven't really talked about Willie Howe, have we? Because we know that Steve Collin had a strange experience with Jo and her partner a few weeks ago at Willie Howe, and many people have. I mean, I suspect that there's a lot of people. I don't mean sat in chat right now, but there's a lot of people had experiences at Willie Howe and burial mounds similar to Willie Howe throughout the years. Have you visited Willie Howe, Maeve?
I haven't visited Willie Howe, no, but I have visited Pudding Pie Hill, which is near Sowerby.
Okay.
And that's probably about an hour's drive inland from Willie Howe if you're going due west. But they do seem to be linked.
So are we going to hear about Pudding Pie Hill now?
Right. Yep.
Excellent.
But Pudding Pie Hill is a mound on the outskirts of Sowerby near Thirsk. And that's a picture of it that one of my fellow Dowsers took. And we went there in, I think it would be the summer of 2021, when we'd just been let out after lockdown. You're allowed to go out in groups of 6.
Okay.
So six Dowsers went there. And funnily enough, I was looking up on the internet yesterday, ready for this, and the website that talked about it links it to Willie Howe, saying that there's similar folklore about the Fae folk at Pudding Pie Hill, just as there is at Willie Howe. And I didn't realise until yesterday the two are actually linked.
Yeah, that's
so
fascinating.
The 6 of us went there. It was the first time I had any sort of an experience with an elemental being or a nature spirit. As I said, we've been reading this book, The Land of the Fae, by Rob Wildwood, and one of the ladies who came with us, she's been able to see nature spirits and communicate with them all her life. So to have her with us and know that she's credible, we knew that, okay, I've never experienced them before, but there's got to be something in this, because this lady is definitely not just making it up. And we started off, we were opposite the hill, just at the opposite side of the road, where there's a packhorse bridge, and there were 2 or 3 trees. And we just started off dowsing the trees. And then my friend shouted to me and she says, I think I've dowsed a tree spirit. Because we found out in the Dowsers that a lot of trees do have a spirit attached to them who looks after the tree. And so I went over, and what I do, I don't always use dowsing rods. I actually use my hands, as we mentioned earlier, and I can feel the outline, just as I would feel the outline of your aura. I can feel it by my hands. I'll feel a thickness, and then possibly a little electromagnetic tingling. So I started going like this, and first, because we always pay respect to the unseen beings, I asked its permission. Can I douse you? And I felt in my head I got a yes, and I think somebody's rod's got a yes. So I went like this, and I said, I don't think this is a tree spirit. It felt like a little man between 2.5 and 3 feet tall. So my friend tried to douse his outline with her dowsing rod. And again, she asked his permission, and he said, yeah. So she's dousing it with his dowsing rod. And somebody else he's saying this tickles. And then my friend came over who's been able to see nature spirits all her life. And she was seeing the sort of thing I was getting. If I get a picture in my mind's eye, it feels like it's somewhere over here. I don't know if there's anybody in the chat might resonate with that. But it's like, it looked like a leprechaun, but he was dressed in sort of black and purple instead. And it had like a waistcoat on. And he's, I think it was my friend who can communicate with nature spirits. She says, he keeps saying, can he come with us? So she said, no, you stay there. And then we crossed over the road to go to Pudding Pie Hill. I think we'd forgotten about him. It must have been 10 minutes later. Got across the road, and there's a little gate you have to go through to get up to Pudding Pie Hill. And he's standing there. And there he was again. Can I come with you? And
Can you come with me, or can I come with you?
Can I come with you? That's what he's saying to us.
Yeah.
And at the time, I'd never encountered anything like this before. So my brain's going like this, trying to rationalize it. And I'm thinking, no, I've just got to go with the flow. I can't rationalize it yet. I've just got to stay with an open mind. And we got the impression that he could come with us as long as he held somebody's hand. So I was the one who ended up being told to hold his hand. So I put my hand out like that, and no word of a lie, I could literally feel a hand holding mine, which at the time was seriously weird to me. But when I went to the Oldham conference earlier this year, and I was listening to what Nick and Sarah Carl were saying, about hands materializing and that, now it makes a bit more sense. It was almost like I could feel his etheric or astral body. And so we walked up the mound, and I'm still holding on to this little man, thinking, I've lost the plot here. But my friend who can see nature spirits said, no, he is there. And for some reason, when we got up onto the mound, she says, you're not to come up any further. She says, the Fae up here don't want him up here. He's been banished. They don't want him here. And so it was all peculiar. So I ended up staying about halfway up the mound, looking after this little being or whatever he was, with my friend's husband, because she also got told that the Fae up there didn't want any males, and this chap was the only male with us. So I think it was me, the little man, my friend's husband, and the dog all stayed halfway down, and the others went up and I think they played some flutes and did a bit of dancing, to show a bit of respect for the Fae and that. And then we all came down. And somehow we decided between us with dowsing that, we somehow got to get rid of this little man, put him back wherever he was supposed to be. And it was decided he wanted to be taken to a tree on the other side of the road. And it was really weird, this, but I sort of lifted him up. I could feel his etheric body. And it was like there was a portal in the tree, and I just put him in there. And somebody said, yeah, the portal's closed behind him, and he's gone.
But why, Mave? I'm asking you a question I don't think you can answer. Why couldn't he just move himself?
Don't know. I honestly don't know. I mean, presumably he came out of one in the first place.
Okay.
But I mean, this gets weirder, because he started appearing to us in different places over the coming weeks. And at one time,
so he could move about.
Yeah. He could definitely move. I mean, it might be that they were just trying, because because we'd set the intent that we want to know more about the Fae. We were trying to be respectful and we wanted to learn. It could be that I was just shown how to put him in this portal because something is trying to teach us that they use portals in trees.
And all of
But
this is around this burial mound.
yeah, well, it's on the opposite side of the road to the burial mound.
Yeah, it was
But
in
it
close
was on the small
proximity.
road. Yeah, yeah.
Well,
But then a couple of weeks later, I think it was the same group of us. We were at one of the other ladies' houses, and I can't remember how he turned up now, but this little man was there, and he was sitting on a chair at the garden table with us. And somebody said he wants some chocolate. So the lady who owned the house went and got some chocolate, and I think it was this really good quality organic chocolate. And as I say, we can use these dowsing charts to measure things. So before she gave it to him, she got this chocolate, and we've got what we call a Bovis scale, and we can measure the life force in foods. And so I think, let's say it was on a scale of -10 to +10. The life force in this chocolate measured at something like +7. It was good quality stuff. And so she got this bit of chocolate and put it down on the table in front of where we could feel this being sitting. And a few seconds later, we just got the impression that he'd done what he wanted with the chocolate. So she picked up the dowsing chart and dowsed it again. And it dowsed at something like -10 on the scale. All the life force had been sucked out of it according to our dowsing. So he'd taken the life force out of that chocolate. And what we seemed to work out was that when these things morph out of just being an orb and become the outline of a being, it takes energy to do that. And to maintain his form, he needed some life force energy, and that's what he took out of the chocolate.
Okay.
And it's possible that in another scenario, that it could have actually leached the life force energy out of us. But and one thing we do in the dowsing groups, we do protection. We like put ourselves in a bubble of white light and things like that, and actually go through a protection ritual to stop anything like that happening because we know it is possible. So I think that's why. So we did learn a lot from this, but all the while I'm just thinking, is this real? Am I making it all up?
Yeah, well, it is fascinating, and I'm not saying that it didn't take the life force out of the chocolate, but I just get the feeling that these things are real. We've got to establish what the real is, and it's giving us what we think it's doing. Because you can't imagine it taking the calorific value out of chocolate. You would think it would be a different type of energy. I don't know. And maybe if I'd have been there, it would have presented and done something else, or someone in the chat had a different view on it. It would have presented and done something else. That's where I'm going with it. I'm not downplaying.
An angel or whatever. Yeah, I'm sure it is. It just present to. We were a group of dowsers that wanted to learn about it, and it probably knew that we use these scales to measure the life force in food and things like that. I mean, it's not something I can rationalise, really.
No, I don't think it's anything any of the fun.
I was reticent about talking about it, and then I thought, well, you're always saying to people who usually have bad experiences, come forward and speak about it. Now, this wasn't anything on a par with what you and the other people have experienced, but I thought, well, it's something, what have I got to lose by mentioning it?
Well, nothing at all. And there's nothing meant in when me saying I can't get my head around that. Yeah. Because who can get their head around? There's people in chat. There's nearly 200 people in chat, and we say every week or most weeks, or I do. There'll be some people there that have had absolutely amazing experiences. Some that have had horrifying experiences. And if they were to come here and tell us or tell a group of people, we wouldn't be able to bend our heads around it half of the time. But that's why people are here. They're looking for answers. And I dare say that there's some things in here tonight, what you've spoke about, that'll resonate with a lot of people. And it'll be too much for some and not enough for others. It's same with what we all talk about. And there's nothing wrong with that, Maeve. I thank you for sharing these
Stay
experiences.
sceptical, I think. And if it's something you yourself haven't experienced, you've to be sceptical but open-minded. Because until you
Absolutely.
experience these things yourselves, you can't. And when you do experience something like that and it doesn't fit your view of reality, you've got two choices. You either pretend it's never happened or you change your view of reality. And
Yeah.
that's what I keep having to do.
And that, do you find then, Maeve, as you're getting more knowledgeable or discovering more about what you're looking into, that from a standpoint you had no interest in it, and then suddenly your life changed and you had all these esoteric views and interests, but now from that early beginning to now, where are you? Are you a different person in your belief system to where you were when you
Oh,
started
yes.
with it?
I'm probably a different person in my belief system to what I believed 6 months ago. Because I literally do try and stay open minded. And every time I have another experience or I meet somebody who tells me about an experience, who, like yourself, they're credible, I have to
Yeah, yeah.
change my ideas.
Yeah, and I think we've got to remain open to doing that, haven't
Yeah.
we? Is there any more to add to the? Oh, just out of interest, I'll just add this little bit because I'd looked at Pudding Pie Hill. It's a weird old name, isn't it? But it's all a bit like Willie Howe. Why would you call a burial mound Willie Howe? But there's a legend, or in folklore, it says that if you run round Pudding Pie Hill 9 times, go to the top of the hill and put a sharp object into the top of the hill, you can hear the fae. You can hear the fae speaking. Now, okay, folklore. But what's interesting is on the outskirts of Flamborough, which is 3 miles from where I'm sat now, there's a legend of a spirit who's associated with the fae, called Jenny Gallows. And she's supposed to have reside. The spirit of Jenny Gallows resides in a dried up pond. Nobody quite knows where it is. There's lots of stories. It's a very old story, and it says on the outskirts of Flamborough. And I'm not going to say I know where it is, but I know where there's an area that potentially could be. But the story goes that if you run round this hollow, this dried up hollow, 9 times, just like we're Pudding Pie Hill, the apparition, the spiritual, whatever it is, of Jenny Gallows will come out. And are some of these just stories that have been added to and fitted into locations, or is there some truth to it? Why 9 times? It's just.
Sometimes when you start looking into the energy around these places, though, I mean, some places you'll get a spiral around the whole place, and it's quite possible there's an energy spiral around there with 9 loops, and that if you follow the energy spiral, maybe you're doing something like walking a labyrinth. I mean, it's only a guess, but there might be something to it. I don't know. I never ran round Pudding Pie Hill once, no man 9 times, so
Well,
I can't say.
at Flamborough, they've tried to pin it to a quarry it's actually in the garden of a property at Flamborough. But if I did a bit of work, and if you like, sad Anna, but if you ran around that 9 times, you'd be doing nearly a mile. So that's not going to work. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's not going to work. So whether it's just a folk tale that's just been elaborately enhanced over the years, or whether there's a grain of truth in it, I don't know. But I found it fascinating that we've got a very similar story at Pudding Pie Hill to what we've got at the Jenny Gallows story at Flamborough.
Yeah.
And incidentally, Willie Howe was excavated in the late 1800s by Canon Greenwell, and I've spoke about this before, but him and a guy called Pitt Rivers. They excavated lots of burial mounds around Eastern North Yorkshire, but there were only one that held an air of mystery and sort of captivated him and said there's just something very strange about it, and it was Willie Howe. And he literally did hundreds, and I don't know what they found in them. As regards the collective, I don't know whether it were Greenwell that found the Falkton drums I think that was in Elf Howe or Spell Howe, obviously close to Falkton, and these are in British Museum. And then they were, I don't know if they are now, but they were number 9 in the most sacred artifacts found in the world.
Wow.
Little chalk drums that were carved by a Neolithic man. It's fascinating, isn't it? And I'm rambling again, so let's just have a look at a few questions, unless you've more on Pudding Pie Hill.
I think. Oh, the only other thing was when I looked into the Longton gnomes case, I started Googling what about gnomes as elemental beings, and I've come up with a few references to say that gnomes as earth elementals have the job of basically weaving together cosmic energy coming down from the sky, telluric energy coming up from the earth, and feeding that into the networks of energy lines and grids around the planet. And I found another book by a Dowser called Natasha Hoffman. It's called The Standing Stones Speak. And that's also talking about it. And it says, I mean, I don't know if this is right or not, but it fits. It says that this takes place in mounds. And I'm thinking Pudding Pie Hill, Willie Howe. And they say that the earth elemental that does this weaving together of the energies is a goblin or gnome-like being. And that's exactly what Steve described last Sunday, seeing at Willie Howe, and what this little being that we saw at Pudding Pie Hill was.
I
So
see, yeah.
what we see was actually a manifestation of the elemental being who does whatever it does to put life force into the energy lines around the planet.
I don't know. It
No.
could be fascinating. I don't know whether it were in first book, Truth Proof 1, whether I spoke to an old chap from Burton Fleming, that's very close to Willie Howe, who used to walk his dog around the area and claimed that he'd seen a little man near the burial mound, about 30 inch high, with dark brown leathery skin, which frightened him to death because he said he had black eyes. But I didn't feel the tracing of a person. He actually saw this little being. So the full manifestation of somebody appearing. So it is fascinating, Maeve. And you talked about stones then, and what the stones that speak. The book.
Yeah, it's a book called The Standing Stones Speak.
All right, but
yeah,
I can't say about a standing stone speaking, but I know close to Hornsey, there's a stately home or a manor house, and in the grounds of the manor house there's some big stones, some big that have been placed there at some point, but they're not standing stones that you'd think of like the Rudston Monolith or Stonehenge. But there was a fisherman, probably going back 20 years, who claimed that he were communicating with the stones and getting information. Have you ever heard of anything like that?
Yeah, that's exactly what this book's about, The Standing Stones Speak. It's about this dowser called Natasha Hoffman and her partner Hamilton. They went to Brittany, to the Standing Stones at Carnac, and through a mixture of dowsing and psychic ability, they got some information out of some of the standing stones. And they were told it had been encoded in there by the archangels at the end of the First World War. And standing stones often include quartz, and quartz is used in computers, and it's to do with it holds a memory, and that's how it's thought by researchers that standing stones can actually hold information.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I don't know the composite of the Rudston Monolith. I think it's grit stone, but you can see sparkly bits in the Rudston Monolith, which we think is quartz. And Les would tell you, because Les came with me. We took Peter Masters, who's a bit of an electronics expert. Not a bit, he is. And he took his computer and he took lots of different things to take readings. And when we went this particular day and we filmed it, it was kicking out 1.6 gigahertz, which the monolith itself. But then when we went another time, there was nothing. But it was strange that we went there looking to see if that's what it did, see if there was some kind of frequency or signal there. So that's interesting itself. Something like giving us what we want, and we did film it. It is on the screen as showing it doing it. So I don't know what it means, but fascinating. So let's just have a look at a few questions, Maeve. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, brilliant.
We might have more of the same here. I don't know. So Steve's gone. Loves Maeve description of the Fae as nature spirits. That's what I call them. Okay, nature spirits. Okay, pretty straightforward there. So we've got Mel. Mel Suter. Hi, Mave. Have you ever seen Erwin Saunders with the Pixies in the Woods at all? I don't want to downplay this, but is this all make believe? We know that what you're talking about today, what I talk about, some people think can't get my head around any of this, but I think is this all done with CGI? I don't know.
Yeah, I think I saw one YouTube about it, and I couldn't make my mind up. Was it real or not?
I don't.
It's
Clever. Does anybody in chat know? I see Dave K. Let's have a look. Dave K. If it's Dave K I'm thinking about, Dave, you used to live on Spraer Road next door to me, so you live near Mave. So good to see you, Dave. I think it's not forced to be, is it? But
I was on Somersby Avenue, I think it was.
Yeah. Well, it's a small world, isn't it? Let's have a look. We've got Steve Collin. He's got some questions in here, hasn't he? Wow, must have done something awful to banish him out of the... Oh, he's talking about the little spirit type thing. If you were getting the suggestion from the Fae that he wasn't welcome.
I don't know what went there. Somebody suggested there was possibly some sort of a curse involved, but we never really got to the bottom of it.
Okay. Steve Stockton in chat. Good to see you, Steve. Well, it's good to see everybody in chat. But I will say this: if anybody wants to look at an incredible YouTube channel, look at Among the Missing, Steve Stockton, because he's got some absolutely amazing things to share with people. Let's have a look. This might help us a little bit. Dragonborn 9 times because 3 is the sacred number, Paul. So 3 3 is 9. Thank you. Kind of makes sense. Yeah, why not? Because I really don't know. And let's have a look. Because we've got 5 minutes left. Right, let's have a look. There, we've got somebody here who's given us something. John Doe, the name Willie Howe is believed to have derived from the Anglo-Saxon. I'm not even going to pronounce that, meaning sacred place. Didn't know that, John. Thank you. That's and I didn't. Yeah, that's good. And the stories from Willie Howe they'll go back further than the 12th century, obviously, but they were documented or chronicled by William of Newburgh back in the 12th century. And I'm sure the same goes for the other ancient sites. But let's have a look. Steve's got another question. Let's have a look. Just like to say what a fabulous guest Maeve is, and she needs to get to Willie Howe. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll have to go one day, definitely.
Well, yeah, and we've got the Ghost Whisperer himself here, Andrew Ross, similar to the stone tape effect in... Yes, absolutely. What do you think to that, Maeve? Do you think it's memories and echoes of events trapped in stone, as Andrew was suggesting?
Yeah, possibly. Like I said, there's quartz in stones, and any computer expert will tell you there's quartz in computers.
Yeah, but if it's just trapped in stone, then Andy, and then whatever's interacting with these stones seems to have a mind and thought process. It's not just some kind of tracing of time that's repeating itself on a loop. And I don't know. Once again, Andy Ross, Ghost Whisperer, the ghosts of Durham. If you like ghost walks, Andrew's the man. Absolutely brilliant and a really genuine guy as well. Let's just go up here a little bit. And I think we've done with questions, to be honest with you. So I hope I've got through them all, no doubt. And I probably haven't got through all of them, but it's been fascinating, Maeve. And is there anything else that you'd like to add to what you've shared with us tonight?
Not really. Just other to say I've got enormous respect for all the people in the chat that have experienced these terrible things that I've not experienced, and I think it's absolutely brilliant that you've brought together a community where these people feel where they can talk about these things without fear of being ridiculed. And from talking to some of these people at Oldham, I know it means an awful lot to them. So I'd just like to say thank you for creating the Truth Proof community, Paul.
No, thank you. And you're spot on, because without the people in chat and the people that look at this afterwards, it's nothing, because it's only me talking to people like yourself and other people, and you guys being willing to share your thoughts and experiences that make all this absolutely worthwhile. And I love it, because I just know that there's people out there that just might venture forward. I've got kind of big apologies to make to some people, because I've got reams and reams of information because I'm a paper person, me. And I get an email and I usually print it off for some reason. It's all over walls. People come in here that tell you. But the stuff there's a backlog of it. I was talking to Patrick Daniel in the week, and he was saying to me, "You just can't get through it all, can you?" And it's not. It really isn't possible. But I do. But it's just a slow process. So you just got to keep. You just got to keep plugging away at it. And I saw somebody then say, "Oh, it's Andrew said it. Please press the like and subscribe." So I never say that enough, and Mick Park tells me that as well. So if you're enjoying the show tonight and our discussion with Mave and the other shows on Truth Proof, please press the like and subscribe. And as far as I'm concerned, Mave, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, and I'll see you very soon.
Yeah, thank you very much. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye, and thank you. Thanks for the support, guys, and we're going. Bye-bye.
Oh, wow.
Saw it twice, so I was like, oh my God.
That was just weird.
I always used to see a light coming up,
Yeah.
like a headlight, but there was nobody there.